is Rachel Dion Thunder. I am the CEO and one of the co-founders of the Indigenous Protector Movement, which is based here in South Minneapolis, just down the street here on Franklin Avenue. And I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, each and every one of you, and for everybody that is also watching live or even in the future. This issue with Pipestone and the issue of violent extraction from the land and from sacred places is a top priority, not only for our organization, but for Indigenous peoples and communities across Turtle Island and also around the world. For those of you who do not know, Pipestone is a very sacred place where the red pipestone is quarried and comes from for pipes, for chanupas that are used in our ceremonies. And before we get started today, I do want to make an acknowledgement that we have the stone is here in the room with us. It is over there next to the eagle staff. It is over there next to some pipes, some chanupas. We wanted that stone to be present here today as our relative, right? Because I think that one of the things you'll get from today's conversation is that a lot of times when you're talking about a pipeline, you're talking about a mine, or you're talking about extraction, in the Western world, it is talked about as a material. And as Indigenous people, it is not a material that can be harvested and profited from. It is one of our relatives. And so we wanted to bring that relative into the room today, into this conversation. And so I wanted to make that acknowledgement. And there's some smudge there. If you guys haven't been able to smudge, there's smudge on that table. And there's some asema, some tobacco. If you want to offer some tobacco to that stone, it's over there as well. I want to also say that here on the screen and in that screen in the back, there is a QR code. And if you scan that QR code with your phone, it will take you to the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission website, where a public comment is currently open regarding a permit that was submitted by Magellan Pipeline Company to build a petroleum pipeline next to the Pipestone quarries in Pipestone. The public comment period ends tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. And so I encourage each and every one of you and all of our relatives that are watching to please submit your public comment as soon as possible. I was told that the pipeline company had 150 comments submitted yesterday by their supporters. And so we need our people and our relatives and our comrades and our allies to be submitting comments at the same rate that they're submitting comments. I also want to acknowledge where we are here in Minnesota, that this is Dakota land. And I also ask you to forgive me. I am simply a Nihil Nihiwak Plains Cree woman living on Dakota land. So take pity on me. And I'm humbly here to moderate this panel and guide these questions today. So we also want to recognize that the relationship to the sacred stone extends across many Indigenous nations, and that tonight we want to hold both of those truths, that Pipestone is within Dakota homelands, and also that it extends to many other nations across Turtle Island. The last thing I'm going to say before I'm going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves is that this is a public conversation about ceremony, but it is not a conversation in which anyone is being asked to disclose ceremonial knowledge that is not meant to be shared in a public space. And so there's certain things that will not be covered tonight that are only shared in certain circles. But with that, I do want to thank all of our panelists for being here. And I think we're going to start with Gabby. If each of you could just introduce yourselves briefly to our audience and everybody listening.
I'd like to greet you all, relatives. Good to see you all. Really happy to be here with all of you today. My name is Gabby Strong. My Dakota name is Tania Wakawi. I'm Assistant Wapton Tribal Citizen, also Bidewakan to Dakota, which is where I make my home in the southwestern area of this place we call Minnesota or Minnesota, depending on what community that you're coming from. So I'm happy to be here as a Dakota grandmother, as a tribal citizen, and also a part of the Indian collective.
Wašte, it's really wonderful to see you all here today. It's good to see support in our people from the community. It was good to hug everybody that I know. Iktomi Washtewia ka chokutowia imakiapi. Washitu chaje bdu hashni. My name is Iktomi Washtewi. I also have another name, Blue Road Woman, and I do not have a white name. And I'm enrolled in the Crow Creek Sioux Tribe. I grew up in Pipestone, Minnesota. And I'm also Hunkpapa from Standing Rock, and my dad's Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Hopi. And currently live in Imnijaska, St. Paul, Minnesota. And I am the mother of 3 daughters, and I also am a part of the Braveheart Society from the Ihanktuama Koche. Pidamia.
Hamadakyapi, Nick Tilsen, Amachapi, Chantea, Wašte, Nape, Tuzapalo, Tabloka, Wakita, Amachapi. My name is Nick Tilsen. I'm a Blala Lakota and Dakota from Ridge. There's any Ridgers out there from Pine Ridge in South Dakota. I'm with Indian Collective. I just recently moved back to this area, the greater Twin Cities area. And I'm a pipe carrier and a sun dancer, and that's how I'm showing up here in this conversation here today. And honored to be sitting here amongst good people, doing good things, and to be here with all of you.
Mujuni Johnny Shinabe do Wasum Minini Indigo Makwan do de Mogakani do Jiba. Minini Ayan Omano. Fred Desjarlait is my name in English. Lightning Man's my name in Anishinaabe Moan. I was born and raised in Red Lake. I live here in South Minneapolis, and I work with Red Lake as a cultural coordinator and spiritual advisor for our tribe. And today I'm here just to come show support for something so important. You know, us as Native people, we all have our land. That's what makes us who we are. And this stone is very sacred, and that's what it was magnetizing all of us together to come share conversation, energy, prayers, and thoughts together for something so important. And that's why I'm here. So good to see everybody with you.
Thank you. So I think just to give our audience a little bit of a projection of where this conversation is going, we're going to begin specifically with Dakota relationship and place to Pipestone, and then the conversation is going to expand more into the broader cultural and ceremonial relationships that Indigenous nations have with Pipestone, and then we're going to finally move into responsibility, threats, and what does it look like, or what does it mean to protect Pipestone and to protect these lands and places that are currently under attack by a very violent authoritarian regime. And then at the end, we're going to open it up for some audience questions. And we actually have a table over here with some note cards and pens. So if any of you get a question that percolates in your mind during this conversation, feel free to write it down on one of those cards over there and drop it in the bowl, and we're going to answer a few of those towards the end of the conversation. So I think that in establishing relationship to place, I was actually going to start with a question for you, Gabby. So I want to begin by grounding us in where we're talking about, and that Pipestone is located within Dakota homeland. So, Gabby, can you begin by talking about the Dakota relationship to Pipestone, historically, culturally, and today? If you could open us up like that, and then if any of our other panelists have anything that they want to add as well.
Thank you for giving that time to ground us in where we are, where we stand, where we live, our connection to this land, to this place. And I can speak as, again, a Dakota mother, grandmother, also descendant of many brave men and women, my grandparents, my homkamke, that have struggled to defend and protect this land that we love. Because this place we call Minnesota, as I was taught, which is where the water reflects the sky, because of so many of the lakes and rivers that we enjoy today that are also under threat. The water quality, the pollution, on all fronts. There are many struggles to defend the things, the places, the people, the land that we love. And this was our Garden of Eden, this place that we're connected to. We were placed here as Dakota people. We did not come here from someplace else. I know that, this is often referred to as new territory, new world, places to be discovered. But this was an old and ancient, familiar place to us, our people, to our grandparents. We are grounded here. Our grandparents are buried here. The blood of our people are part of this place, this land, this makoche that we love, and that we've been entrusted to care and protect and to steward. So that is where we are. And I want to invoke one of my grandmothers, because I feel like she sent a message on the way here. Her name was Hazawi, and she survived the internment, the concentration camp at Fort Snelling. She survived the first efforts of state violence here in Minnesota, Makoche. And those efforts to exile and extract from the land that we love. When we think of that place, Pipestone Quarry, Iyan Sha Ooke, the place where we dig for the Iyan Sha that we use. There are many places that we harvest from. This is a most special sacred place. The only place in the world over thousands of years that this particular rock, as it's called, was formed and made for our use. And so that spiritual connection, that blood connection to that place still lives today. There is a direct connection to that. It is something that is not a new struggle. And I want to just name that as well. I want to thank all the young people like Rachel and Crow and others here for taking up that struggle to defend and to protect. These are struggles that continue. And I want to name a time in 1984 when one of those first efforts to protect the quarries was made, a run at that time. And not only to protect the quarries, but also the sale of the Pipestone itself, through commercial use. I want to name that as well. Commercial use within that commercial capitalist framework. Because we ourselves as Indigenous people, we have our own solidarity economies through trade and barter and gifting. And I'm not referring to that. I'm referring to the commercial use of Pipestone. And that too deserves our attention and our protection. But I first wanted to ground us in the importance of this place, where we are, this beautiful place, Minnesota, Mokoche, that we as Dakota have always been connected to, that we're placed here, where our origins are, where our creation began. This is that place. And to all of our allies and our friends that make this place their home. The impacts of extraction industry right now, this political machinery, is impacting all of us. And we need all hands on deck for this. So I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to be part of this conversation tonight, for coming out and being part of it. Pidama.
Thank you, Gabby. And I'm really thankful that you touched on, the history of the violence that has happened to the original people here, and how that is also inherently connected to the violence against the land, right? Because as Indigenous people, as Native people, we are of the land and the land is of us. And so for that understanding for that understanding to just be absorbed a little bit by Western society and Western worldviews is very, very difficult to have happen, because these worldviews are just so contrasting of each other. So it kind of brings us into the next question of what Pipestone actually represents. And so for many people, and I would say for most of Western society, people know of Pipestone as Pipestone National Monument, or as just some type of stone or a rock. But we want them to know, and I guess my question for our panelists, and I think we were going to spin this one to Nick, is what do you want them to understand about what Pipestone means to Indigenous peoples in contrast to Pipestone National Monument and these labels and Western frameworks that they often try to put us in?
So I think Pipestone is not just a place. This stone comes from a special place. But if you think about what we use the Pipestone for, we use it for the chanupa. And that chanupa was brought to us by the white buffalo calf woman at a time of great hardship and suffering of our people. And that represented the beginning, our continuation, our return to our matriarchal ceremonies. And so this chanupa and every chanupa that's around there, it's a representation. It's a representation of the original white buffalo calf pipe that was brought to our people. So when we think about this battle and we think about this attack on the stone itself, this is a spiritual battle, because the white buffalo calf woman coming to our people at a time of great suffering then brought all of these ceremonies. The government knew that these ceremonies is what made us strong, so they outlawed them. They outlawed these ceremonies. They outlawed our ability to carry this chanupas, to speak our language, to practice our ceremonies, to live that way of life, because they were threatened by it. And now we carry these chanupas, and since that time, there's been a huge cultural resurgence all throughout Indian country, and actually all throughout Turtle Island. That's why this battle, when you think about it, go to any nation in the United States, you'll find a chanupa. 100% chance. Any nation that will win as far north as to the Gwich'in, all the way down to Mexico, to Hawaii. Somehow I ended up in a sweat in Hawaii, and they're all singing Lakota songs. The chanupa and the ceremonies that go along with it are widespread all throughout. It's not just a part of the cultural resurgence of the people from this territory. It's part of the cultural resurgence of indigenous people all throughout Turtle Island and around the world. And so when you think about this is a spiritual battle. This is a spiritual battle that is an assault on something that we have fought, that's connected to our identity, that's connected to our very survival as a people. It's an assault on the matriarchs. It's an assault on the matriarchal and spiritual energy going all the way back to the white buffalo calf woman who brought this to our people. So we have a responsibility. Also, this is not merely a political thing. Many of our spiritual people, Sundance people, ceremony people, a lot of our people who carry these chanupas do not identify themselves as political. And that's okay. But what happens when they come for our ceremonies? What happens when they come for the teachings? What happens when they come for the things that we use as conduits? We can't sit on the sidelines. Right? We're required to protect those things. It's a spiritual responsibility. And when they are asked to, when I say they, I mean our spiritual people that run these ceremonies are asked to, they will, if you follow the protocol of the chanupa itself. I've seen that and experienced that. So I think that when people are out there, for folks that are viewing online and folks that are in the room, you have to understand this from a bigger perspective, because sometimes in these battles, they make us organize within their confinements. So they say, oh, this is a stone, it's a resource, it's this, but it actually is way more than that.
Thank you, Nick. And it's absolutely true. It is a spiritual war, and I've heard you say it many times before. That we always lead with ceremony, that we always lead with prayer, and we always lead with that intention, right? But then we have to meet those prayers halfway with action. And so and this is some of the conversation later on in the panel, is like, what does that look like to protect a place like Pipestone? But to build a little bit off of what you were saying just now, Nick, and I'm going to turn to Iktomi to answer this question now, because, you were mentioning that, that when we talk about the pipe or Pipestone, that we're talking about it as much more than like an object or resource. So Iktomi, without sharing anything that should remain within ceremony, can you talk about some of the responsibilities and relationships that are connected to that pipe, and like what that means to Dakota people, to pipe carriers, to any indigenous peoples that have connection to that stone? Like, how does that ground us in our ways of being?
Well, when I think of Pipestone, I remember the stories that my Uncle Orville and my Auntie Paula share of how that stone became the blood of our people. It came the blood of our people because of something not so great happening. They say that back over in Chicha Hollow in South Dakota, there was a man who came into the community, and he was a really good hunter. And so the people, the men and the boys, were really excited to have him there because he was teaching them how to hunt. teaching them how to do it in an easier, faster, more effective way. And so it was good when he came. And then he started to teach them how to be greedy. So they started to hunt for sport, bigger antlers, taking that they didn't need to take. And then they started to hear from the females that they were being harmed and women were being stolen. And they found out that this young man was teaching the boys how to hurt women. And what he taught them was, to hide under a teepee. And when a female would walk by, they would take her and hurt her and harm her. And so the elders, they said, no, this man needs to leave now. He's going to cause something bad. And they didn't want him to go. So they fought the elders. They didn't listen. And so the elders, they kept trying to tell him, no, he needs to go. You guys are going to cause something bad. And the Wakias came. The Wakias came and they created a flood. And one girl got away. She ran to a tree and she was able to escape the flood. But our people, they drowned. And when it all went down into the ground, that's where it went into Pipestone. And so there's no coincidence that this same object was brought to us in a hardship, and that a woman brought it to us. There's no coincidence in that matter. So when I think of Pipestone, I think of all of our people. I definitely know that it's a conduit to our spirit relatives and Tunkashina and our Kushi energy up there. But I also think of our women when I think of the responsibilities that this pipe, that this Chanupa has, because so much has been done and so much is being done to our women. And I'm glad that our relatives up here are talking about the extraction, because Unjimaka is a woman. And it's very hard to differentiate what is happening from our women to actual earth. It's the exact same thing. And so when I think of our Chanupas, I think of, our families and what our altars are. Our altars that we use for ceremony are really important, but so is our hochoka, and that's our home. That's our home, and that's what we created in our home. So I think it's really important, and one of the most important responsibilities is to tend to that hochoka as well as your ceremonial hochoka, because our families have gone through a lot, and we need to make sure that we're focusing on that and bringing that back.
Thank you. And yeah, our families have been through a lot. Our people have been through a lot. The earth has been through a lot. And, the trauma is here. We see it all of the time in our people. We see the trauma on the land, and so it makes it really difficult sometimes to even have the space to stand up and do the right thing and to protect the land, because as Indigenous people, a lot of times we're fighting our own battles too, and so I'm really glad that you shared that, Iktomi, because it's important to remember that. This next question, I'm gonna swing all the way down the table to our brother Fred down there. I was using Google because I was curious, and in the past I did a lot of work in the Midwest region on repatriation efforts to repatriate ancestors and ceremonial items back to tribal nations. And when I was doing that work, and when I would go into these institutions and into these universities, all over the Midwest, Indiana, Kentucky, North Carolina, even down into the South, I would always see pipestone that was taken from graves and stored in these institutions. And so, like, even my younger self, like, doing this work, I was seeing, like, our ancestors were even sharing the stone with each other. They were sharing the ceremony with each other, like, even before colonization was a thing. And so the next question for Fred, so Pipestone, where these quarries are, and the sacred place is Dakota land, but the relationship to Pipestone extends across many indigenous nations. And so, Fred, how should we understand those relationships without erasing Dakota relationship to this place and honoring this diverse connection with Pipestone?
So it's true, hearing these stories, Tony, the origin of all of these places in our history came to be. That's our living history lives within us. When we voice it and share it, it continues. People listen and they tell their kids, and that's how things continue. So here in Dakota country, yes, Pipestone, the quarry, the area has that legend. It has the legend of origin. Also, what Iktomi says, these are all our people's history. And when we verbally say it and put it out in the universe, it continues. And it's really an important thing. And the Chimokaman, or in the English language, they call this red stone catanite. We call it the blood of our ancestors. That's a huge difference in definition. So what it means to us is exactly that, the blood of our ancestors, some of those legends of what happened at that specific site, the blood flowing into the earth, this big vein of red stone created, is sacred to all tribes all across Turtle Island, because if you travel anywhere, like Nick was saying, that you're going to find this in our ceremonies, because in the Anishinaabe language, sin, stone, it means our oldest living relative. And that's what we call it, Misko Wasin, Makade Wasin, and it means our oldest living relative. So within our own language, within our own stories, the power of what it means exists. So it's really important to hear these origin stories and repeat them and understand them. That connection is so important to us, because when we have our pipes and we go into ceremony, that goes up to the Creator. That smoke, what we put in our tobacco, what we think and pray, goes up to the Creator through that stone, through the blood of our ancestors, through what was done. And there's times in our own history through Anishinaabe where the stone has surfaced in our relationship to us here in this area, the Anishinaabe and Dakota. The history of conflicts that occurred within our own tribes. People have their own variations, and the stones come together in our history, in Red Lake history. When we occupied the land, the red and the black stone were together, and there was a time where there was some fighting going on, and it wasn't good. They say the Creator showed himself, told everybody to stop the bloodshed, and told the two camps that they have to cook and take care of each other. They got to go make a pipe for each other. So they say that the Dakota went all the way down to where they knew, to the Pipestone quarry. And then the Anishinaabe party took some of them and they went to the LCO quarry. And they made pipes for each other. They cooked and they took care of each other's own camp. And they call that Beka Diziwin. Beka Diziwin means it's like you become calm and peaceful. You neutralize things, disagreements. And that's how powerful that stone was for anybody that used it in ceremony. It creates takes our prayers up to the Creator. When we use it in settings where we need it the most, it creates that Beka Diziwin, that peace, that calm, that love, that understanding. And that's one thing that I always think about when I have red and black stone I use. And both stones are from the earth, from our people, from our own stories. The Makade Waste was created by what we call the thunder beings, the thunderbirds. And they struck the earth, created this black vein into the earth, and that's what we make our stone pipes out of too. They do the same thing. They're used for ceremony and our connection to our homelands and origins, just like the redstone is really important. And we need to start talking more about that, sharing stories from all the communities and bringing that out, because we're restoring that knowledge, we're restoring that sense of identity of who we are, where we come from, and how important it is. And that's really a beautiful thing, hearing these stories today and knowing that there's never no coincidence. All of the indigenous people, our histories are going to be subtly connected on a creator's web. No matter which way you try to fit the puzzle, we're all connected. And this stone brings us there. The stone is so important. And and that's kind of my what I wanted to share for that question.
Thank you. And it's when you really think about, because like as Indigenous people, we say, well, we've been here since time immemorial, right? Like when we say that, it almost like doesn't even give it justice. Like we have been here for thousands of years. We have been here longer than when the pyramids of Egypt were built, or any of these like what we would call Western historical like time marks across time. We have been here truly since the beginning of time, and so it makes it easier to think about more of this widespread significance of Pipestone and relationships that continue to exist even to today between Indigenous nations. So thank you for sharing that, Fred. This next question, I'm going to open it up for the whole panel. So if anybody feels moved, just take it and run with it. But we're going to kind of focus in on protection versus preservation, right? And so kind of the goal in this question is that to lead into discussion about Indigenous stewardship versus government management. So the question is that sometimes governments, or I'm not even going to say sometimes, governments talk about preserving a place, while Indigenous people talk about protecting a relative or fulfilling a responsibility. Is there an important difference between those ways of thinking? Right, and how that differs in these worldviews and mindsets, and what does that mean when we're entering into a fight to protect a place like Pipestone? Not everybody all at once.
So we wants to do rock, paper, scissors. I'll take the first shot at it. I mean, that's always been the issue with any kind of environmental protection work, right? Is they try to separate the people from the land, so that there's like even the government viewed us as a natural resource. I mean, if you look at it, it's still why like even the Bureau of Indian Affairs is the only thing that has to do with human beings in the entire Department of Interior. It's how our entire relationship with the federal government is. So in many ways, if you look at the way the federal government looks at us, looks at Indigenous people in the American political system, they look at us as a natural resource. Mainly because every law that they've ever created has been created for the purpose of extracting from the places in which we live. And so that's why that's like a political connotation. So I think when you think about preservation and the way that they look about it, they're saying, oh, you can protect this place, you can do a conservation of this place without actually acknowledging the people, and the people as a relationship to that place. Therefore, that approach always results in erasure of our people. And it always results in erasure. It also results in erosion of our human rights that we have. Our human rights and our spiritual rights that are inherent. Not rights that we have to ask for, but rights that are already ours. And that approach, and that approach that the government looks at things, it not only doesn't acknowledge them, it tries to erode them and erase the fact that many of our rights and responsibilities that we have are deeply inherent. So I think that when we think about protection, we're protecting a place because there's a greater spiritual responsibility. Therefore, how we go about protecting a place is more systemic and more rooted, and it's connected to our identity. And so I think that we always have to hold the line, because I think that those different avenues in different ways, I mean, conservation could be another form of colonialism. Conservation colonialism is real. You know, you've seen it around the world. Hey, we'll protect this place, but we're not going to necessarily give access to indigenous people to their own homelands, right? We're going to protect this place on Washichu terms, on white terms, on government terms, and not with the people in those places. And so that's why I think we have to continue to navigate the deeper meanings and conversations about what it's about.
Yeah, said that beautifully. I mean, I don't have anything to add to that. But does any of the other panelists have anything that they want to add on?
Yeah, I really want to echo what Nick mentioned. I'm just thinking about, you know, the current and maybe the pattern of the extraction industry, the political machinery around it, and the language that is used oftentimes on us as Indigenous people, with our tribal leaders. And it not only pertains to Pipestone, it pertains to, you know, all extraction, all land resources, water resources, and that is, you know, the inevitability of what is to come oftentimes. You know, we're encountering this with AI data centers and our lands being targeted. And there's often this language and this messaging that is used that there's an inevitability to this happening, and we need to just adapt to these things, meaning we need to accept these things. I'm so happy that I come from people that have resisted and defended and protected, because that language, that is industry, political, extractive, it is rapist culture language. When we talk about the inevitability of our lands and all of our sacred sites being open and available. And so the fight and the struggle that we are in now requires all of us. It is a spiritual struggle. It is political. It is something that all of our people, no matter what role we fill, it is important that we all take part in what that will mean to protect. And Pipestone, our waters, our land, all of the so-called natural resources that we are connected to. So just words of encouragement to each and every one of you. The land informs us. Take the time to stand on it. Take the time to really become that fuse between earth and sky. As human beings, that's who we are. And that kind of information will always flow. That is that ancestral knowledge. That is that ancestral intelligence flowing through us. And so I just want to mention that as part of, you know, the efforts and the endeavors that we're all talking about today.
I'm so glad that you brought all of that up, Gabby, because Pipestone is not facing these pressures and in isolation, right? If anywhere that you look across Turtle Island or the world, sacred places and water continue to face violence and extraction, pipelines, mining, development, AI data centers, clear-cut logging, and there's this larger pattern, right, of when you go to these places, like some of our team just went to the Upper Peninsula to support a camp there that's fighting a mine at the Porcupine Mountain Wilderness. The rest of our team just came back from Pipestone. And when you go to these places, it's like, it feels so isolated. And a lot of these indigenous communities feel isolated in these struggles and in these fights. And so, like, part of, like, us doing this panel, part of us traveling around to these different struggles and land defense struggles is so that our people don't feel isolated. That our people can understand that all of these land defenses are interconnected in connecting to protection of the land and ultimately fighting against violent colonial extraction. So I'm really glad that you brought that up, because there are so many struggles right now happening across Turtle Island. And so kind of blends into our next question, and this is open for anybody, of really looking at extraction and disturbance and violence of the land. And so what happens, this is the question, what happens when industrial development, pipelines, mining, and all violent forms of extraction are proposed near places that hold ceremonial and spiritual significance? And what gets missed when those decisions are treated primarily as environmental or regulatory questions? And I would take that question even a step further in, like, how do you think that we, as Indigenous people, not that it is our responsibility, but how can we bring our ceremonial and cultural connection to these places into these Western spaces that are making these decisions in a way that they're not going to understand, because I don't think they're ever fully going to understand, but in a way that they can respect and that they have no choice but to answer to.
Your question reminded me of a time in 1990, so I think I was 8 years old. They did the peace run to Pipestone, and we lived there at the time. And at the same time, they were having the spearfishing battles up in Wisconsin. And there was a lot of violence going on over there. A lot of you probably remember that or were there. And my dad, you know, he has been a part of AIM for my whole life, and who knows how long before that. But he, you know, had this idea to get a staff. And so he asked Steve Red Buffalo, who was Iktomi, and asked him to create this staff, and he offered his chanupa to do that. And so they did that, and they decided to run up there to Lac du Flambeau. And so they took that staff up there to fight that battle. They wanted to make sure that that spiritual power was coming from one place and going to another. And they ended up having to go to court for their rights. I don't remember the treaty that allowed them to have these rights, even though it is an inherent right. But the treaty was for the people to keep their fishing, hunting, and gathering rights. And they won that. However, that battle spilled over to Minnesota, and that staff was taken over there. In that court case, I want to say it was the Voigt case. That was taken all the way to the Supreme Court. And that staff was taken to the Supreme Court as well. And so as far as them respecting that ceremonial perspective, I'm not sure if that happened, but the decision was 5-1 in favor of Native rights. And so your question reminded me that, you know, there are avenues for our people, and it is a spiritual battle out here. But helping each other, just like those ley lines, you know, the sacred sites, they connect all together. And it's important for us to make sure we're using those routes.
Yeah, the one thing I was going to add to that was just, like, every time we take to the land and go to these sacred sites, we change the power dynamics of those systems, like, entirely. And so I think, like, we got to get these fights out of these boardrooms and out of these rooms of hearings and back out onto the land. And I think that when we have a strategy where you have people on the land, on these sacred sites, while there's people inside those hearing rooms, and at the same time, you know, inside the legal rooms at the same time, and those strategies are connected, that's when we win. I mean, that's when we win, because it creates that spiritual connection to it. And I mean, honestly, when we occupy shit, it changes their power dynamic, because all of a sudden we're on the land, and we're in the place of being spiritually right, because we're there, and the ancestors there. We do ceremonies there. Spirits are coming there. This is not just us doing this. We are conduits for that, for the spirits, for the grandmas and the grandpas that have come before us. So when we do that, it is meeting them halfway. And those spirits, they get fired up, just like we do. They get fired up. They want to come. They're on the land. They're doing, you know, they're fighting for the land. Those spirits are happy that we're doing that. And we got to remember the power of that. And that's a power that they're not used to, like them as in the powers that be. And it changes what happens in those places. And it also creates the dynamic where we have to bring them to our table. We bring them to our table. You know, when we were part of the occupation at Desjarlait this spring in the Black Hills, they asked us if we wanted to negotiate. They asked us if we wanted to negotiate. We said, yeah, well, only at Desjarlait in a teepee when that Chinook was loaded. That's it. No law enforcement, no guns. We'll talk to the federal government, but you come to our camp. You come to the spot where the destruction's happening. And when you get there, you're not going to see guns. You're going to see chanupas. And so when the federal government got there, and the head of the Forest Service, Director of Tribal Relations for the whole United States, he flew all the way from Washington, D.C. He had to leave his law enforcement at the gate. And then he came in there. And then we sat down and we had a pipe ceremony. And then we met. That changed the dynamic. And so I think that in those moments, we got to create those. We have to create those things, because that's tapping into our power, to our spiritual power. And it does change the political dynamics at the same time.
You know, in our organizing strategies, like I've used the term a lot of meet them on all fronts. And so a lot of the things that you just talked about is exactly what I mean when I'm saying that. You know, like let's meet them spiritually. Let's meet them on the land. Let's meet them in the courtroom. Let's meet them at the public comment. You know, so it's like meeting them on all fronts, but bringing them right onto the land and into these ceremonies, because right now, in a lot of these struggles, things are out of balance. So a lot of the work that we're doing as organizers and Indigenous activists, or whatever label you want to put on people that are doing this work, is like bringing that balance back and rebalancing the field, so to say. And, you know, I do also want to acknowledge that, I think we touched on it a little bit, is the traumas and things that our people have experienced, and that there are Indigenous people who may know that the pipe is significant, right? But maybe they've been separated from culture, language, and ceremony through generations of, boarding schools, relocation, adoption, and other colonial policies. So I would say, or I guess my question is like, what would you want our Indigenous relatives to know about how they can approach these spaces? Because I do think that a lot of our relatives who are reconnecting because of all of these traumas that have been placed on our people, like, I know there's a lot of our people that want to get involved, but maybe they're like intimidated, or like they don't know the stories, or they don't know the teachings, and so they feel like they can't get involved in this struggle, in this fight. And so if any of you have words of encouragement or guidance to give to our relatives that are out there watching or listening, what would you say to them about connecting with these struggles and our people?
You know, again, it goes back to our connection of who we are, where we come from. Our creation stories, our legends of our nations bring us to all places of significance. And those are who we are. So relearning them and understanding history, you know, those are all tools to empower ourselves with wisdom. Because all of that exists within our own. I believe in our youth. I believe in all of the ones going to school. You know, Nick talked a lot about being in these rooms, moccasins on the ground, and then we've got some relatives going to school freshly with their education, you know, making decisions, understanding these systems. So, you know, it could be one of those, you know, but also, you know, with this Pipestone, one of the things that we really encourage our young men and also our young women to is make a pipe, to know that stone's going to talk to you. That stone's going to help guide your life. When you use that pipe or create something out of that stone, it's going to be a part of your bundle and walk with you. It's going to be just like it is, Asin, your oldest relative. That wisdom will be working through you, and that's your oldest relative. It's going to give you wisdom to carry forward. It's going to give you protection. It's going to give you guidance and wisdom. So, you know, anybody out there that's thinking about what we're talking about here, you know, this story is yours. It don't exist without all of us here in the room, all of us out there on Turtle Island. This is our story because this connection to the stone is so powerful and so important. It has many, many stories. And those stories are going to instill who you are. It's going to cut your path. It's going to help you and your family, you and your nation, and to learn it and to remember that all of these items here don't exist with our energy. So my encouragement is just to come, ask an elder, ask somebody that's out there doing the work, because you're a part of it too, and everybody's energy and time is appreciated. The more the better.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Fred. And I think that, okay, yeah.
What I would add is, you know, there's a value system that we have, and even some of us that know what those values are have a hard time living those out at times. And we all encounter that. You know, I've sure had my fair share of, you know, the harsh scoldings and things that make it hard to be involved or be engaged in those kinds of things. My mother always talked about working with compassion, leading with compassion and that intention of being compassionate with one another. And in Dakota, we call it Unshida, to look at one another with compassion. And I just want to remind us all of that. We each have a responsibility to live and walk within those values, to look at one another and to treat one another as relatives, no matter what we know or where we come from or what our experience is, because we are all needed in these times right now. We, each and every one of us, are so needed in these times. So look at each other as relatives and work with that intent of compassion. Be compassionate with one another.
Thank you, Gabby. And that's important too, like, and I think this could be like a whole other panel discussion on you know, on allies, you know, because we need allies. Like we need all people to come together to fight issues like this and to all be one against an issue like this, and just to be compassionate with each other and be welcoming and be open, and don't be intimidated, So I think because we're going to kind of phase here into this last section of our discussion today, which is going to focus more on the protection element, specifically for Pipestone. So when you hear the phrase, and this is to all panelists, and I welcome all of you to give input on this. So when you hear the phrase protect Pipestone, what does protection actually mean to you? Is it stopping one pipeline, or does protection require something much larger and more permanent? And I guess to ground this question, there's a public comment deadline tomorrow at 4:30 for this proposed pipeline at Pipestone, Minnesota. So really digging into what does protection of Pipestone mean, and I guess to put it in the most simple terms, in a way that let's all think about it this way. What do you hope your grandchildren will be able to say about how we responded when Pipestone needed protection?
I have one of my takojas here, two of them actually, with me right now, and they're in the back. One is 14 years old and one is only 8 months old. So they're getting to see what Kunshi is up to, not only today but every day. There's an immediate threat right now, and that's why we're having the conversation around the Magellan pipeline reroute proposal. There's the QR codes, the comments that need to happen, need to go in now. That's the immediate threat. But there are ongoing threats and struggles all the time, and also with Pipestone. And I would say protecting that, defending Iyan Sha Ooke, the Chandu Hupa Kapi, is we need to understand its meaning. We ourselves. We need to understand our responsibilities, our connection. That's part of protecting it. We need to understand the commercial use that's going on right now with Pipestone. That's also part of protecting it and defending it. But we ourselves have to take the responsibility to learn as much as we can about its meaning, its spiritual significance, and what it's meant to us, and what it will continue to mean for our very survival and our way of life as Dakota people, as Indigenous people. So to me, that is what the protection of Pipestone means to me today.
I think, when we protect something such as a sacred site, it's more than just that site, because with how the government has been handling our people and our places is a domino effect. Once they get this, they're going to get that. Once they get that, they're going to go get this. And so it's really important to remember that this can create a domino effect. And also, I want to mention that with research from our geohydrologist on the Braveheart team, she did analysis of the scarcity of our stone. And there's only 8 to 11 inches, and it goes down 200 to 300 feet. So there's not a lot left. So that means it's even more important. But also that brings me to mention that there's a lot being sold. There's a lot of pipes being sold, and a lot of our own people are doing it. I'm not trying to scold, but it needs to be mentioned. And trinkets are being made. made for necklaces, made for, different things like that are not supposed to be done. And so I think all of those things need to be acknowledged and changed. And I grew up in Pipestone, and one of the things that I noticed there, and I still see some of my Washichu friends posting that their parent or their relative was working at the bank for 25 years. And you know what they got? They got a pipe. A Washichu person getting a pipe because they worked at a place for 25 years. That's harmful to me. That's violence and erasure. And so I think, for my own goals is to try to stop that. And that was the whole reason why my family moved there when we were young. My dad had influence from the Iktomi. He prayed with them, and he knew that that was something really important, so that we moved there. And just feeling in my chest, talking about it is what I grew up with. But also, the chanupa, when you have one, you're not supposed to lie. You're supposed to walk a path that's hard to walk, but it can be done. And so walking that talk, I think, is one of the most important things we can do to protect that stone.
And because it's not, yes, there is this immediate need, like what Gabby was saying, with this public comment period with this pipestone, but it also extends to protecting pipestone in all spaces, and thinking of even the protections that exist, say for eagle feathers, right? How can we get those same protections, those same levels of protection for pipestone, right? It can be done. And so that is a broader protection of the stone. So we'll go to Nick now with the same question. What do you hope our grandchildren, and let's just say 7 generations from now, will be able to say about how we responded when pipestone needed protection?
Well, I have 14 grandchildren in here. They're all in the back.
Oh.
No, I think that we came together out of love for our way of life. That we showed them that we came together out of love, and that we came together to pray together, to organize together, to do something good for them, and that we honored the ancestors that gave their lives before us. They gave their lives for us to be here to this day, and that their lives that were given and those who stood before us, that their sacrifices weren't for nothing, because we stood up, and that we did it out of honoring them, out of respect for ourselves, and looking out for the future generations. And so my hope is that the generations down the road, when they see us talking about this, they understand the complexity of what this means for our people. They understand the deeper spiritual significance. My hope is that 7 generations from now, that every one of our young people know that story of the white buffalo calf woman. Why she brought that chanupa to the people, what it means for our people, and that this isn't just a stone, but it's part of a conduit, a spiritual connection. And that's my hope, and I think that in the future, it's really about them having a sense of who they are. And I think that when you think about what young people are facing right now, all throughout our communities, right down the street, there's an identity crisis going on. They're looking for a sense of belonging to be a part of something, to be accepted. And this battle, in this sacred spiritual battle, is a way to call people in, and especially call young people into that now, but in the future too. And because I think that we have to keep doing that.
Fred, what do you hope our grandchildren will be able to say 7 generations from now on how we responded when Pipestone needed protection?
That question is really, it kind of really echoes in my mind, because everything we do is that concept. We want to set a moccasin trail that the ones behind us can pick up. So I think having this knowledge carried forward, sharing more knowledge of the origins of this, everybody on here that spoke about that, beautiful stories. And I think that the ones coming up behind us will listen to this, even this interview, even this everybody up here. They're going to take something on there. And my hopes is that what we talked about today started fires, little fires all over, even online, even in this room. That little fire of knowledge gets carried forward, and somebody keeps the kindling going, and that they pick it up and stand up for it. Because, like I said, this is ours. This stone, this conversation, the protection. We have to be wise about how we protect it, wise on how we approach it, and we're very capable of doing that, just like our ancestors. We're remembering what they did, their efforts, we're carrying it forward. So going forward, thinking of little ones is that the kindling of knowledge, that little fire is ignited, and that it goes forward, and that we can all continue to be proud of this, and also protect it in the wisest ways we can, because this stone is so important in all ceremonies all across the earth here. And that what we did today, that this knowledge echoes out into the universe, opens that door, and the good comes back for everything that we did it.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. You guys have been amazing. We're going to do, I think, 2 audience questions. We have one here in person that I have in the bowl. Before I read that, I do, for everybody that's watching live, and I have it pulled up on my phone, if you have a question, put it in the chat, and that'll be our last question for this evening. But I'm going to pull this card here out of the bowl. So the first question is, what is the docket number for the public comment for Pipestone? And so I pulled it up here, and so the Minnesota docket number, everybody take your pens out, is docket number IP 7109. And you can also, I think there's a second where you can do PPL 23-109. So I think that either one of those would get your comment to the correct place. And what we'll do is we'll put a post up on our socials that'll have the docket information. If you're going to submit a public comment, it does not take long. If you follow this QR code, they have a form where you can fill out online, or you can send an email. They have an email address where you can just draft an email. And when you're submitting your public comments, it's important to remember that, because what they're proposing is they're proposing this permit to reroute pipeline. So the pipeline used to exist, it got decommissioned. They applied for a permit last year, it was given, and then because of Indigenous organizing, that permit was rescinded last year, pending cultural surveys and consultation with the tribes, which they did not do. And so now they have reapplied for a permit this year, and that's what this public comment is for. And so when you're submitting your public comment, make sure that you're clear that we do not want a pipeline at all. We do not want any of these reroutes, right? That we want no pipeline in Pipestone, Minnesota. And so the second part of this question on here from the audience is, and this is to the panelists, what are some ways that we can protect Pipestone? So I think that this is from, I would consider like maybe your everyday community members, like what can they do to be involved in a fight like this? Obviously not everybody can go occupy the land, right? There's different ways to be involved. So if you could just touch on that a little bit.
Well, I think the comment thing, I mean, even if I could do it, you could do it. I went on there, I filled it out, said a few things, put it in there. Don't think it's a good idea. Just do it. I mean, it's like do it, and then once you've done it, then you're like, hey, this is pretty easy. I'm gonna have my Tanji do it too. You could do it. Somebody comes to your door and says, let me borrow 20. So you better do your comment first. Because you're not gonna pay me back. So I think that kind of, really though, to be honest, like that type of organizing stuff really does work. It makes it accessible. Like, you don't have to identify yourself as an organizer or political or anything to do it. You just gotta do it. And I think the first part of ever caring about an issue is learning about it. Sometimes we think that sometimes it's like we're supposed to already know about these things when these things come up. But every time that something like this happens, it's an opportunity to learn some more. So one of the ways of taking action is actually learning about it. Learning about the land there, learning about this chanupa. I mentioned the white buffalo calf woman's story. That story, it's out there. You can you can learn that, deepen your knowledge, deepen your understanding. And I think that even when you submit a comment, one day somebody who's going to make those decisions is going to read that. You do have a voice, and that voice matters, but you have to use it. They expect us to say nothing so that they can say, well, I didn't hear nothing. I didn't hear any opposition. So you're not taking action and not speaking and not filling out the comment thing actually contributes to their narrative. So just want to, say that as a thing. It seems like something small, but it's actually something pretty big.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll also add that, don't be afraid that you're going to say the wrong thing, or that you can't comment because you live in the cities, or you can comment no matter where you live across Turtle Island. You don't even have to live in the state of Minnesota to leave a public comment. And the way that these public comments are now received by these software systems is actually auto-sorted by AI. And so these public utility commissioners, they're not reading the comments.
She's writing her comment.
Yeah, she's writing her comment right now. She's putting a lot of energy into it. But the way these commissioners receive these comments is auto-bulked information. And so if everybody is submitting the exact same comment, or everybody is submitting from the exact same location or the exact same organization with the exact same wording, it all just gets auto-bulked into one sentence that these commissioners are receiving in these reports. And so it's really important that we get a diversity of backgrounds, of peoples, of locations, of reasons, of opposing this pipeline. And that goes for all public comment strategies. That is always a part of these land-based struggles. So I don't think that we have any questions from the live chat. Everybody in the live chat is just thanking all of our panelists here for doing such an amazing job, for sharing these stories, for covering this conversation. And so I want to thank everybody for attending, and let's get a big round of applause for all of our panelists. I think Fred's got one more thing. Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, just, talking about being a voice. Remember, everybody in this room, if not all of us here, we're all tribal members. We all have a tribal council from our nations that sit on local, state, and federal levels. And that's important too, because on a federal level, you look at this administration, they're trying to weaken every angle they could do for tribal nations. So maybe make your tribal representatives, chairmen aware of what's going on here in Pipestone, because that voice on a federal level is powerful.
Yeah.
Local level, and so I wanted to just share that really quickly.
And there are tribes that have passed resolutions for protecting Pipestone, but it would be amazing if we could all ask all of our tribes to do that. And there was also a resolution passed through NCAI, I believe, to protect Pipestone. So big round of applause. Again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our audience. Thank you everybody listening online. Thank you Powwow Grounds for the amazing food. Everybody stay safe. Stay salty. So we use that a lot when ice was here occupying our land, because what melts ice? Salt. So stay salty, stay strong, and stay together. Thank you.